So this is your cube shape, and you did it like this. So your slice count was actually optimal, so that's good. But the U and D moves you did in between your slices need some work. From this particular cube shape and angle, so this cube shape from most angles doesn't need any moves bigger than a 3 to solve it. But you did a couple moves way bigger than 3 that definitely slowed down your execution. When you get here, you don't have to align this corner with this corner and do like this. You don't have to go all the way over there. You can align this edge with this edge and make kite scallop upside down. But also when you have scallop kite here, you're only a 2 move away from being able to do it from the back, but you did a -4 and a 6 in order to do it from the front. What I can only get from that is that you don't know how to do it from the back, or are at least not comfortable. So you should definitely get comfortable doing kite scallop from both angles and upside down. So what you should have done is something like this. Or maybe even this, which I think is worse from this angle, but this could be useful in some other ways. So you had this CO, and you did it like this. So this was an inefficient solution. You did it in 4 slices, and you only had to do it in 3, and that would look like this. Or maybe even this. So it seems like a big habit in your CO is misaligning the bottom layer. You definitely don't want to misalign your bottom layer all the time because misaligning the top layer is way easier and allows for easier finger tricks. And just doing D moves while it's offset is pretty difficult and awkward in the first place. So I'd recommend just using U moves. So this is your EO, and this is how you did it. The only thing was your execution was not good. This alg is only 4 slices, but you regripped for each of those slices. That's a lot of wasted time if you add it up. So you should really learn how to do this alg regripless, and I recommend doing downward slice first, and then finger tricking the 4 like this with your right hand. Or there's an alternate alg that people consider the standard, and that would go like this. Or it's even better with downward slice. So this is your CP, and you did it like this. So right off the bat, you flipped your U and D layers in order to start the alg, which obviously indicates that you don't know the full set. So first off, learn the full set. It's only 8 algorithms, and I'm pretty sure you know most of them. I think you just need to review a couple. And just a rule of thumb, if you're going to flip the layers, you should never have both layers aligned when you're going to do it. You should either have the U layer aligned or both layers aligned. Because that way with the U layer aligned, it doesn't exit cube shape and it's pretty easy to finger trick. And if you do it with both layers misaligned, it's really easy to locate where the middle point of these 2 corners are and get that on the other side. On the contrary, if you execute it like this, then finding the back of this kite, like the middle, is really difficult because you have these 2 edges where you might misalign and it might look right and you won't be able to turn, and it's just an awkward situation. So don't start with both of these aligned if you're going to flip the U and D layers. And you also didn't do this alg regripless, which you should, and that would look like this. So this is your EP, and this is how you did it. So the better way to do this EP is to do adjacent adjacent into double U perm, and that would look like this. And with equator flipped, it would look like this. So your EP alg was 16 slices. The alg I gave was only 9 slices, 10 with flipped equator. So you should really switch to this alg because O adjacent is a pretty nasty case if you don't know how to do it correctly. And it's always an adjacent adjacent away from being a good double U perm. So your cube shape was this, very similar to the last one, and you did it like this. So your slice count for this cube shape was really good. It was also optimal like the last solve. But again, the U and D moves that you do in between your slices need some work. So your first move was a 1 on top and a 4 on bottom, but you finger tricked the 4 on bottom with your left ring. And as you can see, your finger actually has no place to grip on this cube shape, especially for these 3 edges. So that way it's actually really difficult to get a reliable turn. So instead of finger tricking it with your left hand, I recommend doing a wrist turn. So like that, and then continuing the cube shape. In general, if you have a cube shape that has like more than 2 edges right next to each other, you never want to flick the side where those edges are, or else your finger will likely slip or catch or just under or overshoot. It's just unreliable. The better way to do this cube shape is like this. Because the biggest move there is a 3. And also it seemed like as you were doing your cube shape, you paused to figure out where the kite's scallop was. I recommend drilling this specific cube shape so that you know what moves you have to do in order to set up the cube shape. So in this scenario, it would just be a 2 on bottom to set it up. And again, you did do a lot of regrips during this cube shape, so you also should work on getting this regripless. So your CO was this, pretty simple, and you did it like this. No complaints here. And then you had this EO, which you did like this. So that alg was okay, it was 7 slices, but the optimal is 6, which goes like this. So I recommend you use that one instead. So you had this CP, and you did corner permutation parity. So there's a lot going on before you do the alg that needs to be fixed. Before fully recognizing the case, you did a U, a second U, a third U, and then a D prime and another D, and only then did you start the alg. But the thing is, you had your headlights here and here right in front of you. All you had to do was recognize each PLL in order to figure out if they have parity. So this is a T perm, except it's not, so that means it's parity. And this is an R perm, no parity. So this is a parity PLL and this is a non-parity PLL, which means you have parity. So you don't have to do a bunch of mindless U's before you actually recognize the case. Just look at it and only do your moves after you've realized what you're going to do. Also, you did too many regrips at the beginning of the alg. You really should switch to doing this alg regripless, and that would go like this. And so for your EP, you had adjacent, adjacent, which you did like this. So the algorithm was fine and your execution was all right. There were some unfortunate overshoots, but that's okay. The main problem here is the way you recognized it. So you did corner permutation parity, so that way you should know that you don't have parity when you get to EP. However, you still looked around all 4 sides of the cube in order to recognize this. And if you don't have parity EP, you should never do that. You shouldn't ever need more than 2 or 3 sides to recognize a non-parity EP. If you saw these 2 pairs of edges and this block, that's all you need to know that this is adjacent parity. You don't have to look behind here to check that it's solved because you know you don't have any hidden adjacent swaps in the back because you know you don't have parity. So try breaking this habit where you look around the entire cube when you know you don't have parity. That way you'll recognize your EPs a lot faster. I also recommend going on a website like Cube Skills and training your 2-sided PLL recognition. That'll transfer really well into this, especially when you're recognizing corner permutation parity. So you had this cube shape, and this is how you did it. So your alg was pretty good, but the optimal alg goes like this. So when doing this cube shape, it's important to understand that when you have barrel scallop or scallop barrel, if you cut both shapes down the middle, it's 1 slice to shield shield, which is just 3 slices. So that's the best way of doing barrel scallop. So this was your CO, and you did it like this. So this was not a good way to do CO. You did a 3 on top and then a -7 on bottom in order to set it up to the angle that you needed. but you did not need to do that many moves to set it up. What you could have done is just done a 2 on top and then done U moves like that. Or maybe even do a 1 and then a 3 on bottom and then do something like that. But it seems like the bottom misaligning habit that you have also crept into here. And I also noticed the second habit that you have during CO is that you always use D moves to insert your corner. This is really bad because along with your misaligning bottom layer habit, this can cause a lot of inaccurate turns and risky lockups that may cause you to drop your cube. You definitely should start using U moves more in your CO solutions. It's just more natural and way easier to execute. So you had the same EO as last solve, which you did the same way. There isn't really much to say because it's the same alg that you did the same way, and again, you didn't do it regripless, so just a reminder on that. No complaints other than that. So this is your CP, and you did it like this. But that's not how you actually executed it before you started the alg. Here's what you actually did. You did a 2 on top, then another 3 on top, then a negative 3 on top, then a 1 on top, then a negative 3 on top, and then a 5 on top, and only then were you in your correct angle. So obviously this is really bad because you're doing a lot of moves before you even start your alg. And this is the same thing that you did last solve doing your CP. Just remember to not do any moves before you've recognized your case. Also again, this alg can be done regripless, as long as you start with your first slice downward. Like that. You had bad double U-perm for your EP, and this is how you did it. So this is not a good way of doing this case. You did it in 19 slices, which included you doing 1 U-perm on top, then flipping the layers, and then doing U-perm on top again, and then having to flip your layers and equator again. So that added up to 19 slices, and that was way too many to do this case. You only need 7. And it's actually op-op going into adjacent-adjacent, so that would look like this. Similar to your CP parity stuff, it seems like some of the algs you know on top, you don't know on bottom. For example, U-perms. So you definitely want to fix this by learning how to do U-perms on bottom. It would be the same alg, just every move inverted. So I really recommend getting those down. So you had this as your cube shape, and this was your solution. So your slice count was good just like your other solves, but also just like your other solves, you need to fix your U and D moves. So after you do your first slice, when you're 1 slice away from kite scallop, if you can do kite scallop from front and back, you should never be in a situation where you do a 6 move in order to set up the kite scallop. So here you did a 3 and then a negative 6 on bottom in order to slice into the kite scallop. But you didn't need to do that. All you had to do was a negative 3 on top and then slice. Now you have kite scallop and you can do it like you normally would. Also here are a couple other things you could have done. So you had this CO and you did it like this. So this is where your 2 CO habits really hurt your solve, because you had to do a 3 on top and a negative 4 on bottom just to set up your CO. And even though it was optimal slice count, you still did it with the misaligned D layer and with D moves. This is way slower than just doing a 1 on top and inserting it with U moves. Or maybe even doing a 2-2 or a 3-3 and doing something like that. The point is you need to fix your CO habits. So for your EO you had this, and you did it like this. This is actually a really interesting alg. The alg I use is 6 slices, but this is 5 slices. The only thing is it disrupts the CP, but this is a good alg to have in your arsenal. You should definitely still stick with this alg, but you should also learn the 6 slicer that doesn't affect CP, and that goes like this. So this is your CP, your bottom was actually solved, and you did it like this. So just like the last two solves, you did a lot of unnecessary U moves before you figured out what angle this was in, and you actually had it in the right angle before you did any moves. So it especially hurt your solve to do a bunch of U moves. And again, the way you can do this regripless is like this. So you had this EP, which is similar to the last solve's EP, and you did it like this. So I'm really confused as to why you did this bad double U-perm with two adjacent adjacents, and in the last solve you did bad double U-perm by doing two U-perms on top. I don't know why you did those two wildly different solutions for virtually the same exact case, but either way you should use the same approach as I said for last solve, which is op into adjacent adjacent. That would go like this. So for the last solve you had this cube shape and you did it like this. So it seems like you also don't know how to do scallop scallop from different angles. You should definitely learn how to do it from the front and the back. So this was one slice into scallop scallop like this, and you were a -2 on top away from having it be in the correct position in the back. But instead of doing that move, you did a 4 on top and a 6 on bottom, which is way worse. So you should really get your execution down for doing this in the back too. And that would look like this. So your CO was this, pretty simple. No complaints here. And then you had a pretty simple EO, which you did like this. The thing is, doing a 4-4 is not really the best way to do this. This EO is symmetrical, so you can do it from both angles. So instead of having to do a 4-4, you can do -2, -2, which are smaller moves. And that's faster. So you had this CP, which you did like this. There was an undershoot there, so that's unfortunate. So preserving this block was a really smart move because doing VR with this R misaligned gives you good U-perms, while misaligning would have given you UZ, which is more slices. But the way you executed it was not good at all. In square one, when you're slicing, your right hand should only be in two possible positions, like this or like this. That way, this leads to an upward slice, and this leads to a downward slice. The only time your right hand leaves that grip is when it's doing moves that are not slices, you know, like this or that. But when you're about to slice, your hand should be in either one of these two grips. And which one you start with depends on the alg. But what you did instead is you had your thumb on bottom and your first four fingers not on top, but in the front. And this is a really awkward grip for square one. It's not a good start for the alg and generally just doesn't flow well. So you want to start with this grip instead, and alternate between pushing and pulling with your left index when doing the U moves. So you had good double U-perms, but this is the alg that you did. This is a big red flag. You should never, ever, ever use two adjacent adjacents in order to do good double U-perms. Good double U-perms should always be done with the 5-slice alg. And that goes like this. And just to put it out there, this is the inverse. So because of the slice count, obviously the 5-slice alg is better, but also it takes care of the equator flip. And doing double adjacent adjacent really hurts that because you also still have to fix your equator after you're done with those two algs. So you have a really good slice count in your cube shape. Almost all the time you do cube shape, it's usually optimal slice count or one away from optimal, and that's really good. But keeping that in mind, let's go over the 3 things that you should work on. So number 1 is your CO and EO habits. Your most notable habits in CO are that you always offset the D layer, and you only really use D moves and never use U moves. You want to start to get comfortable doing more U moves in your CO solutions compared to D moves. There were many times in your solves where these bad habits showed up and they hurt your solve, and you did more moves than you had to. I recommend you sit down and go through all 7 CO cases and drill the best solutions for them, especially from all sorts of angles. That way you'll start to eliminate the pauses you have when you recognize CO. So for EO, on the other hand, it looks like you just don't know the full alg set, and it's also 7 cases, so it's not that many. So you should also do the same thing as you would with CO and just sit down and learn all the cases and drill them. I've linked some great CO and EO resources in the description. So your second issue is your CP parity recognition. So the biggest pauses during all 5 of your solves were always during CP. And this makes sense because you're trying to avoid parity within this step. And so if you have parity, you have to recognize that and do a longer alg. But it also looks like you don't know the full set. This is really crucial because if you have to flip the layers in order to do your CP parity algorithm, that's just going to destroy your solve. So I really recommend going through the algs and learning them. There are only 8. Now let's talk about recognition. If you're going to eliminate the big pause you have to recognize parity, you have to be more well-versed in the PLLs and the parity PLLs. So I'm not saying by any means that you have to be good at like executing the PLLs on 3x3, but you have to be good at recognizing them. Like if I set up a T-perm, I can recognize that it's a T-perm, but if I have something like this, and it looks like a T-perm but with 2 edges swapped, you would see something like this on 4x4. But you also see it on square 1. So you have to get really good at figuring out which PLLs are parity and which PLLs aren't. For instance, I know if I see only 2 corners on the top layer, that means that that PLL is a parity PLL. So you have 3 scenarios. Either both U and D are non-parity PLLs, or they're both parity PLLs, or it's one and the other. If you have something like this, where you have, okay, this is an R perm except it's not, so it's a parity PLL, and this is a G perm, so that's a non-parity PLL, that means you have parity because this is parity and this is not. So you really only just have to run through the 3 scenarios in your head and then you recognize whether you have parity. It looks like it takes you a long time to recognize the CP regardless of whether you have parity. So I highly recommend training your PLL recognition and checking out Rollo Biadi's PDF of full square 1 PLL, including parity, so you can check out which ones are which. They even have names, so if that helps you. So for the third and final issue in your solving is your turning accuracy and your finger tricks. So this is by far the biggest issue in your solving. Your worst habit is that you regrip way too much. So you had an average of 16.8 regrips per solve. That means you're regripping every 2 slices on average. This is really bad. So what you want to do is do deliberate practice sessions in order to fix this. So you want to sit down and say to yourself, for this practice session, I will focus on reducing regrips and making my finger tricks flow better. Focus on having one of those 2 right-hand grips before you slice, up slice and down slice. And while you slice, be conscious of the fact that you're going to want to regrip to do your next slice. You need to start alternating and going like this without letting go of your hand. So also you should know some important square 1 finger tricks in terms of U and D layers. We have U and D with index and ring fingers. We can do U2s with 1 finger like that. That's called an I-do or an A-do. I don't really know how it's pronounced. And extremely important are wrist turns with your right hand. That way you can transition from upward slices into D2 moves really well. As for your turning accuracy, what you're going to need to do is drill a lot of your algs and find the optimal finger tricks for you and for the algs. Sometimes that'll be finger tricks that you're not used to doing. Sometimes that'll start with doing the slice in the other direction than you're used to. But as you optimize the way you're executing these algs, that'll carry into your turning naturally. So the more you try to make your executions of the algs you already know as best as possible, the better your turning accuracy will get naturally. I also recommend going through your cube shape solutions and finding good finger tricks for those, especially since some of the U and D moves you did were really suboptimal, and you could have done shorter moves in order to cut down your execution time. So you want to aim to have less than 5 regrips for every solve. So I'll demonstrate that. So for no regrips, and I'm going to go for one here. That's one. That's another one. No regrip. I can go into the CP without regripping, and I can go into the EP without regripping. Oopsie. And I'm done. That's 2 regrips. So you've got good knowledge of cube shape, and you've already made the commitment of learning corner permutation parity, which is really cool and kind of rare among square 1 solvers. Once you work on your fundamentals and your turning, you'll already start to see progress once you feel comfortable turning regripless. After that, working on your other 2 weaknesses will be a lot easier because your fundamentals will be way more ingrained into your mind and hands. After you learn all your CO, EO, CPP algs, as well as a couple more easy non-parity EPs, and get your recognition and execution down, you should be seeing a lot of improvement, and sub 25 will come soon. So looking forward, as far as sub 20 goes, the only thing you should build off of is that you should keep on learning more EP algs. The more you know, the more consistent your times will be. I've linked a really good EP doc in the description, but other than that, that should be it. I hope this helped, and yeah, that should be it. Bye.
Wait. You forgot to subscribe. Oh, also, I have an Instagrizzle and a Snapchadoodle.
Frick. What in the frick? You've got to be fricking kidding me. All you Sonic fan fricks.